On the next day of the marriage of the heroine, Alyssa, and Duke Richard, Alyssa enters the Duke's room. She is very happy in the Duke's luxurious room. She tries to lie down on the bed, but tells herself that it is really quiet outside. She wonders whether the Duke has returned to the castle or not, and hopes that he will not come. She is curious but afraid of meeting the Duke. She does not know what his character will be like in the novel, but the heroine, after a little thought, tries to sleep, but suddenly the heroine hears the sound of the door opening, and wakes up and calls from there, but no one answers, and the heroine becomes very afraid and becomes frightened and says, "Who is this?" But it becomes clear after that this strange person is the Duke. Richard is very angry because of his wedding to the heroine Alyssa, which was against his wishes. Duke Richard says to the heroine, "I cannot even look at you. You really look like a mouse that will die." The heroine is afraid at this moment and cannot respond. The hero decides to retreat and leave the room, but he finds that the door has been closed and he knocks on the door. But no one answers, so the Duke becomes very nervous, and at this moment the heroine is terrified, but she notices that there is a strong wind in the room, but the window is closed, and it becomes clear that this is Lublin's power, which is the ability to deal with the wind, and only Lublin's descendants are able to use this power, and the hero will be Richard and his son Hannes. They are the grandchildren who inherited this power in the novel. Suddenly, the heroine notices that the hero is trying to break down the door using the force of the wind, but he cannot open the door. The heroine thinks that the hero will come back to scare her. She hides herself under the blanket, but the hero returns and lies on the sofa. As for the heroine notices the hero, telling herself that he is my husband and who. It is better for me to say hello to him, and the heroine welcomes the hero, but the hero is cold as ice and does not answer her, and the heroine becomes annoyed with the hero and says to herself, "How bad. I don't expect much from this fool." The first night is almost over for the heroine, and the next morning. The hero asks the Duke of Lublin to cancel this marriage, but the Duke of Lublin tells him that he cannot cancel this oath that was already made before the gods so easily, and the hero says, "I have never sworn this oath before." The Duke of Lublin responds to him and says, "So do you want her to be more kind? Didn't you like it? Her appearance, I wonder. I know she is still young, but her face is very beautiful. Or can you not marry someone you do not love, like your father? Are you trying to convince me of such personal feelings?" Duke Lublin suggests to the hero that the hero stay with the heroine until they become adults, and after that they produce an heir, and after that the hero brings his favorite girl to the dukedom. The hero gets angry at the Duke's words and says, "This is not the kind of conversation I want." He uses the power of the wind and flies the paper on the Duke's desk. The Duke stands up and says, "You are the only heir to our family, so it is your job to welcome your companion, the succession to this family, your current position, and all the things you enjoy. Now all this is because you are my heir and you do not deserve to be in this position if you do not have a duty as an heir," and the hero will respond, "Whenever you ask for this position in the first place. I have no intention of doing anything with this little snake, so do not let her enter my room again." The hero will leave the room, but he will be surprised by the appearance the heroine is in front of him, and both the hero and the heroine are trying to avoid each other. After that, the heroine says to the Duke, "Your Majesty, did you ask for me?" The Duke says to the hero, "Listen to me, Richard. I heard that you did not prepare the first meal on your first day of marriage, and thinking about it, I heard from the maid that on the first day the couple should the newlyweds say hello and have breakfast together." The heroine thinks about the events of that day. She is very sad and says to herself, "But I was the only one in the room when I woke up and I thought it was good because there was neither the Duke nor the little Duke in the dining room." After that, the Duke decides that the hero should remain with the heroine in the same room until they get used to each other, but the hero objects and says, "I do not want to share the room with her." He replies that it is normal for any couple to share the same bed, so what is the problem? The hero becomes annoyed by the Duke's words and leaves the room and forcefully closes the door. The Duke gives the heroine a book entitled Virtues of the Wife and asks her to study this book well, and she will be taught the contents of the book the day after tomorrow so that she can serve the family well, and the hero agrees with the Duke's decision and on the other hand says to herself that it seems to be a useless book that only contains old-fashioned ideas, and the heroine leaves the Duke's room annoyed. She says to herself that it is her bad luck to actually study this book. At night, the heroine goes to the hero Richard's room and is forced to go by order of the Duke of Lublin, accompanied by two maids. The heroine says to herself, "I did not want to go, but I ended up being forced." The heroine opens the door, stands at it, and begins searching for the hero, and says to herself, He is here today, but suddenly the heroine is surprised to see the hero's legs. The heroine says to herself, that conversation in the morning between Richard and his grandfather was not an ordinary conversation. I could see that the Duke was looking at Richard as a mere means, and that Richard was resisting his will, which means that the two are enemies, and as the old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the heroine decides that she seizes the opportunity in her favor and goes to the hero and tries to offer herself a toy again in order to win it to her coward, but the hero suddenly responds to her and says, "You are annoying." The heroine becomes irritated by his words and says to herself, "It seems that this black dragon is not in a good mood." She decides to back down, and there is no point in talking to him, and she says good night. She says to herself that it means that my life is so difficult for him, and at this moment the hero has not yet slept, and suddenly he opens one eye and looks at the heroine and acts uninterested. After that day, the marriage lessons that the Duke asked the hero to attend began, and the lesson was held every day. Morning, and the heroine had to learn embroidery, morals, and the necessary behavior that the Duchess must learn. After those lessons, every day, the heroine enjoyed reading books in the family library, which contained a large number of books, as she loved them very much. On the other hand, there was one thing that the heroine was not satisfied with, which was her relationship with Richard, whom she tries to include in her side to help her with her divorce plan, but the hero continues to ignore the heroine, and one night the heroine tries to wake the hero, but the hero tells her, "Just sleep." The heroine says to the hero, "I didn't eat you, so sleep with me on the bed. Let's hold hands together and sleep," and the hero is surprised. From the heroine's words, he remembers the moment when he was sleeping in the library and that the heroine was trying to cover him. At this moment, the hero wakes up and holds the heroine's hand and says to her, "What are you doing?" The heroine says, "I thought you were sleeping, so I covered you with a blanket." After that, the hero leaves the heroine's hand and says, "Did the Duke make you do that?" The heroine doesn't understand anything the hero is saying, so the hero says, "Do you want to seduce me like this?" The heroine says to herself, what seduction is he talking about?" The heroine says to the hero, "I think you're misunderstanding something, but I have nothing to do with the Duke." The hero says, "How am I supposed to believe that?" So the heroine explains. To the hero, she lost her parents a long time ago and there was nowhere else to go, so the Duke brought her here. The hero tells her, those whose intentions are known. The first story they mention is the history of their family. Of course, the hero is not confident in the heroine's words, so the heroine defends herself and tells him, "I thought it would be better for a 12-year-old girl to live here is better than living alone on the street, and for this reason I agreed to get married, and still after all of this." The hero does not trust the heroine, and he says to her, "What if the Duke orders you to do this to seduce me?" So the heroine says to the hero, "Is there a difference, even if your guess is correct?" But the hero he doesn't understand the heroine's words, so he tells her what that means, so the heroine says, "Even if I seduce you, wouldn't it be okay if you didn't fall into that?" The heroine tries to convince the hero and tells him about events she read before in the original novel. There are 4 families in the Arancia Empire that contributed to its founding. The first of them is the Stormy Roblin family, whose members control the air element. The second family is the Flame Carrot family, which controls the fire element. The third family is the Sound Ester family, which controls the earth element. As for the fourth family, it is the earth family. Life directs and controls the element of water. In the first days of the founding of the empire, the 4 families discussed who among them would become the emperor. The Carrot family and the Lublin family wanted to become the emperor. After a long discussion, the Carrot family made an eternal vow to become the imperial family. The Duke of Lublin will always remain the imperial family under surveillance until they cannot tyrannize. However, the crown prince who was made of reason and loyalty became blurred over time and eventually the Cairo family wanted to become stronger than Lublin by uniting the 2 families as the imperial family aspires to gain the power of the Lublin family, so they try to marry Your Highness the Princess and the little Duke Richard. The heroine says to the hero that to prevent this from happening, the Duke decided to bring me here and marry me to you. If you do not intend to marry Your Highness the Princess, someone must be by your side anyway. The hero says to himself, I thought she was stupid, but she is very good. The heroine tries to convince the hero. By trusting her and telling him that it is not the position of Duchess or having a child that is what I want you to do and that she only wants him to maintain this marriage until she becomes an adult and then she will leave the duchy alone when that happens. The hero is convinced by the heroine's words and agrees to the heroine's offer, but he asks the heroine must fulfill her promise to leave. The next day, the hero wakes up from sleep when he feels that someone is hugging him. He discovers that the heroine slept with him in the same bed and also hugged him. The hero feels ashamed of the situation, and the heroine is asleep and clings to the hero tightly, and despite everything, she has not woken up yet. She liked the way she slept. The important thing is that we return to the hero, who is very ashamed of the heroine clinging to him while she was sleeping, and he says to himself, she said that she would hold my hand only yesterday and sleep, but now I am stuck in her arms, and she even threw the pillows from the bed, and the hero is upset because she was pushing him out of the bed all the time. It's night, but the heroine feels cold and the hero covers her and says to himself that this is really annoying. Later, the heroine wakes up and is walking in the private corridor of the palace. The heroine becomes annoyed by the hero's rude behavior towards her and says to herself, he left without even saying hello, left the room empty, and left. After that, the heroine decides that she will go to her room to finish the history book. While the heroine is reading the book in her room, the heroine notices the little maid and says to herself, will this little girl continue to come? By cleaning alone, she has been cleaning for hours, and if she moves incorrectly, she will fall, and the heroine remembers the name of this little girl, whose name was Anne, and she says to herself, I do not think that cleaning the room is this little girl's job. A few days ago, she was responsible for making the bed as well, and she does everything on her own. After this long conversation, the heroine has with herself, she concludes that this little girl is being bullied because she is young. The heroine becomes upset about this and says to herself, how dare adults bully the little girl? I will make them regret it. Meanwhile, the little girl has finished cleaning, and she may be mopping the floor, but the heroine goes to the little girl asks her, why are you the one mopping the floor? Aren't you the one responsible for making the bed? The little girl is afraid of the heroine's questions. She tries to convince her that she is the one who has to mop the floor today. The heroine says to her, I am supposed to be the maid, Lena, who is responsible for the laundry, but Julia is responsible for the dust. So why do you do that? Everything is on your own. The little girl responds to the heroine and says to her, a few days ago, Lena and Julia asked me to take over their tasks for one day, and I was not good at that, so they got into trouble with the head maid, so I felt sorry for that and decided to do their work for them. And the little girl is afraid. So that they might get into trouble because of it tomorrow too. The heroine says to herself, they are leaving their job to someone else. When they are reprimanded, they do it again. The heroine becomes suspicious of the matter. After that, the heroine tells the little girl, Anne, that this is enough for today. She asks her, have you eaten? And the little girl says, no, so the heroine offers the little girl some candy and the tea, and she says that she should have this and not go anywhere, so the heroine says to herself, now she has to deal with the whole matter, and the heroine goes to the Duke of Lublin, and she greets the Duke, and the Duke says to her, what is there? The heroine says to the Duke, I am there, Your Majesty, to ask you for a favor. She asks him to replace her service, and he responds. The Duke says to her, why do you want to change your maid? The heroine says that every day a dedicated maid should come to do one thing, but today there is one maid who does everything today, so she is slow and cannot organize well. The Duke asks Lublin to help Aaron to go and find out what happened, so he says, are present. Sir, the Duke tells the heroine that he will take care of this matter, so she can leave. The heroine thanks His Majesty the Duke, and the heroine says to herself that the Duke needs her and that he can easily throw her away, but without any countermeasures he will not do that. So he does not make things difficult for me, and this way the Duke will not hinder me and I will achieve the greatest benefit. From my position. At another time that day, the maids who had evaded work were expelled from the Duke's house because they made the young maid work in their place and lied. After that day, the heroine began asking Duke Albert for everything she wanted, and most of her requests were met. One day the heroine wanted to attend lessons in finance. But Duke Lublin did not like the idea of a woman taking finance lessons, but the heroine told the Duke that she would take financial lessons to get closer to Sir Richard. The Duke was convinced by her words and agreed to take finance lessons with the hero, and the heroine wanted to attend financial lessons in order to help her do business with alimony, which she will get after the divorce from the hero, Richard, in the future. After that, the hero goes to the hall to attend a finance lesson with the hero, Richard. When the heroine enters the room, the hero is surprised by the heroine's presence and says to her, what are you doing here? The heroine tells him that she still holds the title of Duke, so she must know a little about Tamil and that if you learn finance, you will be able to help the hero, Richard, so the hero responds to her. It is wonderful to hear that from you. Suddenly, the hero and heroine's words are interrupted by the presence of the professor who will teach them Tamil lessons, and he says, I think all the students are here now. The hero responds to the professor's words, welcoming him and telling him that from today she learns finance from his honor and that she is looking forward to his generous cooperation. The professor responds to the heroine's words and tells her that His Majesty told him about the Mrs. enthusiasm for learning and that it is an honor for him to teach the Mrs. After that, the lesson begins and the professor puts an arithmetic formula on the blackboard and asks the heroine to show the numbers 326, 15 and 739 using the arithmetic abacus. But the heroine could not do it alone, so the hero helps her and calculates quickly, and the professor praises him and says, well done, you did it right. After that, the heroine thanks the hero and smiles at him, and the hero is surprised by the heroine's smile and is happy with her, but the moment is interrupted by the heroine asking him to remove his hand from her, so the heroine withdraws his hand. Quickly, he is very embarrassed by the heroine, and he says to the heroine, just focus on the class correctly. The heroine says, okay. And at this moment, the hero says to himself, I'm not helping her. I'm just reviewing with her. The hero notices that the heroine is a fast learner, and that she will be able to apply it correctly in the future, and that she can help him. As she said, then the professor begins to explain, and after the end of the lesson for the day, the heroine tells the hero that today she was supposed to see the area with little Anne, and she suggests to the hero that he go with them, but the hero refuses and tells her that he is busy. At this moment, the heroine says to herself that he should not pretend to be worried about this, and the hero and heroine's conversation is interrupted by the appearance of little Anne, greeting His Highness the little Duke Richard, and the heroine sees Anne and goes with her. Before that, she tells the hero that she will return after seeing the area, and she asks the hero if he wants her to buy him some cookies, and he says so. The hero, this is what children only like. True, the heroine becomes embarrassed by the hero's words and says to herself, if I say that I like cookies, does this mean that I am a little girl? Will he make fun of me, saying that I am a little girl? We are now supposed to be on the same boat, so I thought that we would get along well even if it wasn't. He is kind, but he does not seem to intend to, and the heroine asks herself if she was wrong in her thinking. After that, we return to reality with the heroine, and she tells the hero that she will buy cookies and will eat them in front of his eyes without giving him a single piece. The hero tells her, I don't care, and goes and leaves the heroine with Anne, and the heroine becomes upset by his words. The hero says to little Anne, let's go. Anne is happy because she is going for a walk, and she says to the heroine, okay. After that, in another place, the hero is sitting near the window and reading a book, but suddenly he looks at the sky and notices that it will rain soon, and he says to himself that with the advent of spring in the area, monsters begin to appear. He had previously encountered many monsters on his way to the duchy this time, more than bandits, and this year monsters rarely descend into private areas, but the hero is worried about the heroine lest she get hurt, and he says to himself that she is truly a real nuisance, and he closes the book, puts on his coat, and uses the force of the wind causes him to open the window, and he says to himself that if the hero Alyssa is injured, the old man will expel her and bring in her place another woman with a black heart, so it is better for the heroine to remain by his side. Therefore, the hero decides to go looking for the heroine, and in the meantime, the heroine and little Anne will be in the carriage on its way to the castle after she finished her stroll. Meanwhile, there will be repair work in the northern gate, so the carriage will take the road to the western gate to reach the castle. At these moments, the little girl, Anne, asks the heroine how she is, because riding in the carriage for a long time is tiring, so the heroine responds to her and tells her that she is fine. She suggests that they eat the cookies they bought earlier when they arrive at the castle. The heroine says to herself that it is because she discovered that the men of Lublin do not eat any snacks and that she had planned to establish a snack shop as a business to start after her divorce from Duke Richard, but she was very surprised when she heard that there were no snacks. Ingredients. That's why she bought many ingredients, and if they are not enough, she can return again when the weather becomes nice, but suddenly the heroine's thoughts about danger are interrupted. The carriage is attacked, the heroine falls to the ground, and the maid Anne asks her if she is okay, and the hero tells her that she is okay, and suddenly the heroine hears the words of the soldiers screaming. There are monsters in the area, and the heroine feels frightened by the presence of the monsters. A soldier appears and tells the heroine that she must lie down on the ground and not get out of the carriage until the Lublin knights get rid of all the monsters. The heroine says to herself, did the monsters really appear? And the little maid, Anne, becomes frightened and asks the heroine, will everything be okay? The heroine reassures her and tells her that there is no big problem and that if they wait a little longer, the knights will catch all the monsters, but suddenly the carriage is attacked again and the heroine and the maid Anne fall to the ground and the cookies that the heroine bought fall. The heroine tries to understand what happened, but she is shocked to see the monster from the carriage window. The heroine hugs little Anne and is very afraid that the monster will eat them. The little girl, Anne, says to the heroine and she is afraid, Madam, it is a monster. There is a monster in front of the carriage. The heroine says to herself, what happened to the knights and what about the servants? It seems that everyone has been killed. She hugs the little heroine, Anne, tightly and says to herself, no, no, it is not possible to die like this, and the monster tries to smash the window of the carriage, but at this moment the hero appears and uses the force of the wind to push the monster away from the carriage. The hero says to the monster, how dare a monster like you attack this carriage? But the monster tries to attack the hero and releases his poison at the hero, but the hero avoids the poison and says to the monster angrily, now you are urging me to kill you and I will do what you want. The hero will have a ball of thunderstorm energy in his hand and shoot it at the monster. The monster will die with one hit. At this moment, the hero will hear the heroine's voice calling for the hero. The hero will turn to the source of the sound and will find the heroine calling for him from the overturned cart on the ground. She asks him to take her out of the car, and the hero responds to her, okay. The hero simply replied, he is a cold hero by all standards. The important thing is that we return to the heroine and little Anne. After the hero took them out of the car, the heroine asks Anne, is she okay? Yes, I am fine. And at that moment, the hero sees the heroine and she is happy. Because they survived the monster, and he says to himself, I don't know if she was stupid or nice. She must have been afraid or confused. I can't even believe that she is taking care of the maid instead of herself. She can't even see the wound on her arm. And the hero will be sad about that, and he says to himself, it will take the wound. A few days until he wakes up, and at this moment the heroine notices the hero's presence and interrupts his thoughts, smiles and thanks him because she saved them today and says that she will return the debt to him later, but the hero laughs and says to the hero, how can a girl who loves cookies return the debt to me? The heroine responds to him and says, what are you acting like this again? But the hero, in himself, he says, I am happy because I came. Thank you for listening, dear viewers. I will see you soon with the next part. Many thanks.